we are. 1 o'clock p.m. Pacific Standard Time. MCPR is back at it again. And it's been a while. It's been a long fucking time since I've streamed. Too long, in fact. And I figure that today is as good a time as any to start streaming again, because you may or may not have heard of this already, Deltarune tomorrow. I think that I'm going to give another couple minutes, let people trickle in, introduce what it is exactly that we're going to be doing today, and then we're going to get started on the prediction stream. So, background information. The day before chapters 3 and 4 released, I did a stream where I basically put down a bunch of predictions onto a notepad document. And I made a bunch of predictions. A few of them right, a lot of them wrong. And what we're going to do today is we're going to immortalize some of our last minute predictions. I'll take a little snapshot of where we're at, what sort of Delta rut that we are experiencing at this point, and what fanfictions we have written that we want to see come true in the upcoming Deltarune chapters. So, as you can see, for chapters 3 and 4, I said some pretty insane shit. I said that Mike was going to be the secret boss. I said that Toriel and Asgore were going to be major presences in the Dark World. Neither of these came to pass. Although Mike kinda was a secret boss. A little bit, sort of, but not really, because he didn't give a Shadow Crystal. Yeah, we did not predict the Knight at all. At all in this chapter. But there were a few things that we got, that I got right. The one that I'm most particularly proud of was no Weird Route shenanigans in Chapter 3. That there was no Weird Route in Chapter 3, and I called it. I called it. I will give myself credit, even though it probably isn't even worth that much, and it was probably not super obscure, a very fringe idea either. So I don't think I was predicting a whole lot there, but you know what? I'll take W's where I can get them. So, other questions that I wanted to ask. I have some notes here as to what I want to talk about while we are going through what we already know about Chapter 5. I think the last little snippet of information that we're going to get before Chapter 5 comes out came in this morning in the form of the thank you survey. And, oh boy, we got quite a bit. We got quite a bit to go over there. And that's part of the reason why I wanted to hold off for this long to get started on this. So we're gonna bring this back to the top. Very shortly before the anniversary of chapters 3 and 4 releasing, that we were going to complete our chapter 5 predictions the day before it released. That way I would have as much information as possible, plus it would make for really good content the day before I actually stream chapter 5, which, let's face it, nobody's gonna fucking watch because they're all gonna be playing it themselves. And also, it's gonna be like at 8 o'clock a.m. on a Wednesday. So anybody who's employed will absolutely not be watching this fucking stream. Fortunately for me, I do not have work that day, so I really lucked out on the timing of Deltarune Chapter 5's release, because I don't have to go to work either on today, tomorrow, or on Thursday, so I have enough time to get as much of the game out of my system as I want to, with relatively little time constraint. Anyway, first prediction that I made is that Deltarune's release date was going to be announced on June 3rd. Or, no, on June 4th. That it was either going to release or be announced on June 4th. I was wrong about that. It was pretty close. I did anticipate that there was going to be a release date drop sometime at the beginning of June. I thought it was going to be on the anniversary, but... Alright, prediction. Chapter 5 release on / release date on June 4th. Outcome. Nope. Close though. June 9th for June 24th release date. So we're gonna have a lot of predictions kind of like this. I have some notes laid out beside me that I'm gonna read off so that I can predict the first thing. I want to hear all the predictions about Deltarune. Yeah, that's the reason, that's mainly the reason why I wanted to wait for so long before I got any of my predictions out there, because right now I think we're operating on the most complete information we are going to get before the game releases, because it literally releases tomorrow, and we got some bombshell shit this morning. I'm not gonna lie to you. You know that already, Turbo. I know you know that already. In fact, I'm fairly confident that everyone in here already knows about all of that. So, but before we're not gonna talk about that just yet. We're gonna wait a little while, because first, what we want to do, I want to talk about the plot. And I know it sort of ruins it if the plot ends up being predictable, but I still wanted to predict it anyway, because I wanted to see how much of what I have to say ends up coming true. What I have written down here is determination, hope, willpower. What do these three things have to do with anything? Well, I think that these, one or some combination of all three of these things, is going to influence the plot this chapter. What I think is, I don't think it has anything to do with what line Sham will say. We can make that prediction if we want. But right now, I'm thinking that, like, one of these three things is going to be, like, the main pivotal point of this chapter. Like how Chapter 3 was about abandonment, Chapter 4 was about, fate. I think Chapter 5 will be about one of these three things, determination, hope, or willpower, and how Susie, chapter will be about how Susie learns to wield a combination of these things in order to change the outcome of the prophecy. I know that I've listed the top three ideas of what Sham is talking about with regards to the shadow crystals, but that's because I think that, like, one of these three things will be a very important part of the story. And the reason why I'm saying this is because of the narrative importance of flowers in Undertale. And I know that I'm gonna anger a lot of people by saying this, but I think that the river person's dialogue actually has a little bit of importance here, because one of his lines is monsters, humans, flowers, tra-la-la, shit like that. And I think it's important to understand the difference. No, not the man who speaks in hands. This has nothing to do with Gaster. This has everything to do with Chapter 5 and the unique distinctions between monsters, humans, and flowers. So, what was the big thing that we used to change fate in Undertale? Determination. You all know this. I know this. Determination is like your big thing that you use to overcome anything. And what do we know about determination? Who has determination? Monsters do not. Humans, more specifically Frisk, does. But you know who else has determination? Flowey. Flowey and flowers could be determination, hope, and willpower, but what about courage? Faint courage? I'm not too sure about that. You could say that if you want, but, like, I don't think that's enough. I think it's going to be either determination, hope, or willpower. White Pen of Hope, determination, or I guess willpower. I think it might be like the least likely of the three. Like coursing will into your blade. One of these three things. And I like you can sort of use them like interchangeably. Flowers in Undertale, more specifically Flowey, is very important to Undertale and its theme of determination, because he, prior to your arrival in the underground, had the most ability to change fate because his determination was higher than anything else that had come before him. And the only thing that was able to usurp that was Frisk. Frisk and, by extension, you, the player, and your determination. And I think the flowers will be rather important in embodying these important, like, fate-altering things in Chapter 5. More specifically, I think that the gold flower will be particularly important here, and I'll elaborate more on that later, but I think you can already sort of see where I'm going with this. Why are we saying three of the same things then? Because it's the wording. It mostly just comes down to the wording. Ultimately, I don't think it matters that much. I think it's like just mainly a difference in wording. What I'm talking about, the main concept that I'm trying to get at here is that there is some sort of like internal force, internalized like object or force that the characters utilize in order to change fate. In Undertale, it was determination. In Deltarune, maybe it's determination again. I don't know if Toby would go for that. I think the most likely option is probably hope, because like the whole White Pen of Hope thing, I think it'll become more and more prevalent in Chapter 5. Right on the topic of hope, what about the HP hope thing? Like, I can see it. I can see it happening. Not entirely sure if it's, like, that important. Like, maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but, like, I guess we'll have to wait and see. I think it's just kind of like a getting Carol from C kind of thing. Like, it would be cool if it was, but don't be surprised if it isn't. And with that, we can transition into our next prediction. And that, I think, the main boss of this chapter will be a Darkner that represents the gold flower in the light world. Not that I'm saying that the final boss will be fought in the light world. It won't be. But the gold flower in the light world, boss 3 prophecy is the issue with that. What's wrong with it? What's wrong with like my prediction here? There's a flower in that in that prophecy panel too. You're saying that it has to be Asgore? I don't think it has to be Asgore. It could very well be the flower too. The reason I'm saying that the main boss will be the gold flower is because the gold flower in particular holds like a lot of importance over the other flowers. Like you saw the 7 flowers in Asgore's shop. You saw the bright colors they had. You saw how they were arranged. You know about the 7 souls in Undertale. Like, come on. All of them represent something, some like characteristic that humans have that allows them to like change fate and shit. Like the ball game, I can't name all of them off the top of my head. I'm not that invested in it, but I think that gold flower will have particular importance and will like represent some kind of force that has the fate altering thing inside of it that Susie will like learn something from. Flowers themselves are close to the soul colors. So where am I going with this? There's a chance that Asgore could be the main boss, but what I think is more likely to happen is that if Asgore is the main boss, he'll be like under some control by the gold flower in some way or another. I think that like you gotta pay close attention to that gold flower Because I think, like, what the flowers are going to be in the Dark World is, like, some kind of force. Or not really a force, but, like, like, a crew of antagonists that are, like, headed by the Gold Flower that all try to, like, hinder progress or, like, basically sort of be voices in Asgore's ear. Which is another note that I have written down here, is that other flowers will serve as voices in Asgore's ear. Because, like, it seems like a relatively throwaway line at first, until you, like, understand the context behind, like, what the Flower King is like. Because he has all of those flowers in that big dark room. He keeps them very well taken care of. They were the flowers that he held at his wedding. They're all in glass cases. They're all arranged like Asgore had the souls in Undertale. The symbolism here is very, very obvious. The marketing has featured these flowers prominently. Asgore said that he literally made an audience out of them. There's so much here that really points toward these flowers occupying a major plot significance in Chapter 5 that I think it's impossible that they will not serve some structural importance in Chapter 5 entirely. What form will they take? I'm not sure. I don't know if they'll be sentient. I don't know if they'll be something else. I have a feeling that they're going to have a lot of control over Asgore. Whatever antagonistic or helpful force that Asgore has in the Dark World is going to be, like, largely led by his flowers. Because those are things that he puts such incredible amounts of importance on. I wouldn't be surprised if he went to his flowers for advice. Like, if he knew about a Dark World, he's had a Dark World open for some time, and, like, he goes in and out of that Dark World to ask his flowers for advice about how to, like, get Toriel back and shit. Which is really sad, but, like, kind of on brand for Asgore. And, by the way, if anybody has any problems with what I'm saying, if, like, they have any way to poke holes in my logic here, you're totally free to use chat and just, like, ask me questions about why I'm thinking about, like, what I'm writing down and stuff. Like, this is the time to get all of your crackpot Deltarune theories out there. Asgore has said he has made an audience out of his flowers. They occupy insane amounts of importance. I feel like he's more focused on finding truth and finding a way to get Toriel back. Maybe as a reason. Well, that can be a part of it too. Because I think, like, he does have something that he wants to prove to people. Like, you saw that with the Black Shard scene in Chapter 4. Like, he seems very determined to sort of, like, unveil some kind of truth to people about Dessa's disappearance, which I'm assuming, based on very strong context clues, that December's disappearance was, like, the catalyzing force that led to Asgore's removal from the police force. But, like, the main question here is, like, what does that do to his relationship with Carol? Why did Carol remove Asgore from the police force, but still has, like, a very close friendship with him to the point that, like, he relies on Carol to pay his rent? Because, like, maybe this is part of the conspiracy that Asgore is a part of, but, like, unknowingly. Because he doesn't seem to know anything about what's going on with Chris. Because he seems very concerned with Chris's well-being, but Chris, like, can't tell him about any of, like, what they're doing with Carol. And we can expand a little bit more on that later. But for right now, what I'm getting at here is that, like, the main antagonistic force in the Dark World is going to be Asgore's flowers, and not necessarily Asgore himself. Or if Asgore is the main antagonist in Chapter 5, it will be like at the behest of, or with advice from his flowers. Next prediction that I have here says, Chris will rip out the soul at the festival to meet with Carol, leaving us to eavesdrop on Susie and Noelle's date. Now this one seems a bit specific, so don't be surprised if it doesn't pan out. But I think there's going to be some point where Susie and Noelle and Chris become separated. I think this will be like some symbolic important point where Susie and Noelle ride the crummy Ferris wheel at the festival, like the little one, and we're gonna have some kind of way to eavesdrop on them as like the soul, some way to sneak around the festival without Chris being present. I think that will be sort of like Chapter 4, where Chris exercises an incredible amount of control beyond our point of view, where they rip the soul out and they have to leave us alone for some reason or another so that they can go and congregate with Carol. And they're going to leave Susie and Noelle alone so that they can go off and talk to Carol about whatever, about the shenanigans that the soul is getting up to, stuff like that. What we can do as the soul is we can eavesdrop on Susie and Noelle. So, prediction. Chris will rip out soul at festival to speak with Carol privately, leaving player to eavesdrop on Susie and Noelle's date. And I'm not gonna give I just gave my reasoning to that. And yeah, Chris, I don't think Chris would not be trusting of Carol because, like, there's clearly, like, some kind of blackmail going on between, like, Chris and Carol that requires Chris to go against what they want to do, and they want to be with, like, Susie and Rolstay, they want to be on their side. But at the same time, there's, like, some kind of promise that they made to Carol that requires them to be an ally to Carol despite what they want for themselves. That's what I'm getting. That's what I'm getting at here. And then after this, we're going on to, like, some more abstract things, some more, like, stuff that I just have, like, 1 or 2 words written about that I wanted to go into. But if you do have a theory that you want to pitch here, I'm more than fine to go over it. We can, like, put it down under predictions that other people make, or predictions, like, based on theories that have come out in the last year. But while you type that out, I'm gonna move on to... So in Japanese governments, they have the Emperor and the Shogun. So what do you think? Like, Asgore is gonna be like a weeaboo? That he's gonna, like, be dressed up in, like, Japanese imperial attire? You think that's gonna be his aesthetic or something? Or is... Man, I need to remember what the Shogun is. Is that, like, kind of like his cabinet or something? Oh, the Shogun is the real leader of the military? I see. Yeah. And, yeah, more about Emperor and the Shogun. Yeah, I think it'll sort of be like Asgore being the king of his own dark world, whereas the flowers will be like his advisors. Like his closest advisors, like his cabinet or something. Asgore, Emperor, and Carol Shogun. I don't think Carol will be in the Dark World. I don't think Carol is going to, like, have much of anything to do with the Dark World. I think it's going to be Asgore and his flowers. I don't think Carol will have, like, major plot significance until Chapter 6. Because Chapter 6 seems like the point in the game where there's going to be, like, a massive shift in the status quo. What with the shadow crystals and the eggs, those plot lines sort of coming to an end and giving way. If that were true, I don't think that... I think that Asgore would be the Emperor and Carol would be the Shogun. Because, like, even though it is it was kind of the inverse in the light world. Shogun is Shogun has like the most like real power in the power structure of the Emperor, because like while technically the Emperor has like the Shogun has to do what the Emperor says, the Shogun has like the most actual power and can advise the Emperor to go in the Shogun's interest because the Shogun controls the military. And Carol seems to be the one in town with the most like actual power. She controls the police force, which she never uses because she deals with most of the problems herself. Whereas Asgore like could be his own king, but I don't think that this is like super important anyway, because I don't think like it's actually going to be real. But like if it was going to be real, I do see Asgore being the Emperor and Carol being the Shogun. But I don't think it's going to be Asgore being I don't think it's going to be Carol being the Shogun. It'll be like the Gold Flower or something. No, the Shogun doesn't like... The Shogun has the most influence over the Emperor that anybody does. Because the Emperor can't govern entirely by himself. He doesn't know everything that's going on at all times in his country. And the Shogun is like basically his mouthpiece, his eyes and ears over the rest of the goings on, because they control the military and are a lot more knowledgeable on what goes on conquest-wise and who's got what sort of power than the king. But anyway, let's move on from it. Asgore is Emperor while... Oh yeah, you should probably leave for... I think I'll put like a 10-minute limit on talking about the weird route, so... Yeah, come back in 10 minutes, and we'll probably be done talking about the weird route by then. Or we can just save it for the end, too. I could just, like, talk about something else first. Alright, yeah, so maybe instead of talking about the weird route, we'll talk about the next thing down on our list. Friend. Image _ friend. Prediction. I don't think friend is gonna have any, like, major significant, like, plot significance until Chapter 6, or even Chapter 7. Like, there'll be small references, little foreshadowings here and there, like, little effigies of friend here and there, sort of like there were in Chapter 3, but I don't think it's gonna, like, be super important until later. So now that we've talked about friend, now that we've talked about, like, what the Deltarune community has been, like, stirred up in for a very long time now regarding the image _ friend that we've been seeing a lot of since Chapter 2, let's talk about the secret boss. Because, like, the secret boss of Chapter 5 seems like it's gonna have some pretty important levity to it, because it seems like the end of a lot of things. For one, it's the final secret boss that we are going to be getting a Shadow Crystal for. It is the last Shadow Crystal that we are going to get for Sean, because he basically just said it outright. And this is probably going to be the thing that's going to be, like, the hardest thing to predict, because we have nothing to go off of. The reason why I see a lot of people talking about Friend as being a potential candidate for the 5th secret boss is because we have nothing. We had nothing for Spamton in Chapter 2, and we just sort of had to roll with the punches. We were expecting, like, some kind of secret boss to manifest itself in, like, Mike, but it didn't end up happening. The secret boss wasn't even a secret. That's, like, it's the reason why we don't call it a secret boss anymore. We call it a Shadow Crystal boss these days, and I have to, like, sort of remember to, like, get into my common vernacular that Shadow Crystal boss is the proper way to refer to it. So, I have no idea. I honestly don't know where to start with the secret boss, and we're just gonna have to come up with some bullshit. And I don't know what it could be. But you know what? You know what's, like, been getting a bit of traction again lately? Fucking Woody theory. And you know what? Let's be funny. Let's have a little bit of fun. Let's have a little fun, you know? And there will be a Cowboy secret boss. It's really stupid, but it's the best we got. Because absent a friend, that is like the only other thing that we have any indication as to what the Shadow Crystal boss will end up being. Woody Theory was insane from the jump. Like, it's literally a fucking IP from Disney. The secret boss is obviously not going to be Woody. However, it could possibly be like related to some cowboy show that Asgore has in like a VHS inside of the TV in his house or something. That is the best we have. We are like completely in the dark as to who the secret boss is going to end up being. I think it'll have importance. I think it'll be like maybe a bit more plot relevant than the others, but like we've already fought Gerson. Like, how do we escalate from Lightners being secret bosses, or like Lightners brought back to life? How do we get more ridiculous than Oberon Smog? And if you know what that is, like, props to you. But like it was just a complete shot in the dark. I did not expect either the Knight or Gerson to be secret bosses. I couldn't have predicted that in a million years. Alright, prediction. There will be a cowboy secret boss. Reasoning. I'm just fucking scraping the bottom of the barrel at this point. Chapter 3 and 4 were so far out of left field, I don't even know anymore. Up next that I have, end of Shadow Crystals and Eggs. Now we have to do a little more digging here as to what the significance of the Shadow Crystals and the eggs are gonna be. I have no idea what the eggs are gonna lead up to. Maybe if we piece them all together, we'll get like a little bit of insight into Chris's background. Chris's past before they were, like, maybe even potentially before they were adopted by Asgore and Toriel. And probably before, like, they started acting super weird. Because Noelle thinks they're acting weird. Susie thinks they're acting normal. But, eggs will provide insight into Chris's past. We're definitely going to pass by the fridge. That sounds like a good idea until you consider that Temmie actually has the eggs that you collected already. If you go to the, like, to the light world, if you go to the school, like, it shows you that Temmie has the eggs in her possession on a desk next to her. And it tells you how many eggs you've collected. I'm not sure where the Chapter 4 egg is going to end up. There might be, like, some booth at the festival where the man is, like, facing away from the camera, and he has an egg or something. Sort of akin to how it was in the Light World in Chapter 4, where he taps the takeout box. So, we're just gonna, we're gonna play that one by ear, but I think, like, the rough outline of it is going to be that eggs will provide insight into Chris's past. They seem to have already, or at least chapters 3 and 4 did. Chapters 1 and 2, chapters 1 and 2 were a bit more abstract. It was kind of hard to parse. But chapters 3 and 4 made it a bit more clear as to, like, what the eggs are supposed to be, who the man is. It's tough. It's tough to crack. Egg pun, totally intended. Another prediction that we can make is, when will the eggs become important? Will the eggs have their, like, big important payoff in chapter 5? or in chapter 6. Because, like, consider as well that, like, after you get the Shadow Crystal and the egg in chapters 3 and 4, you can't just, like, go report to Sham immediately and see the effects that your eggs and your Shadow Crystals have immediately. Because in chapter 4, once you're done in the Dark World, you can't go to Castletown. We're going to be able to go to Castletown in chapter 5 and see the outcomes of our Shadow Crystal in chapter 4. And maybe even get a little bit of insight into, like, who the chapter 5 secret boss is going to be. Because we're going to talk to Sham about the Shadow Crystal. But the issue is, are we going to be able to access Castletown after the main events of chapter 5? Because that is something that will very likely hinge on whether we're going to be getting, like, clear answers to the Shadow Crystals or the eggs. Because while we know that there's only going to be 5 Shadow Crystals, will our reward for giving Sham these crystals be given to us in chapter 5 or later? And for right now, I'm going to guess that Toby Fox isn't going to have all this, like, super mega important lore dumpy stuff in chapter 5. However, if he chooses not to give us, like, our Shadow Crystal boss reward or our egg explanation in chapter 5, chapter 6 is going to be dense. And chapter 6 seems like it's going to be dense enough as it is, so I don't know why Toby Fox would cram so much into such, like, a relatively small part of the game. But I think we're just going to roll with it, and we're just going to say no payoff until chapter 6, where an NPC will give us some insight. Same with Shadow Crystals will hinge on whether or not we can go to Castletown after main Dark World events. But then that brings us to another prediction. Are we going to be able to go back to Castletown in chapter 5? Knowing Toby, he's probably not going to let us. But, like, you never know. We could be surprised. We could get, like, a lot of the clean answers that we want. Sort of like we got today. Like, cause, but we're gonna talk about that later. We're gonna leave that for right now. Yes, and Ken, there were cutscenes revealed early that do show Mike as being in Castletown. I think that we are going to go to I've never said that we're not going to go to Castletown at all in chapter 5. The issue that I have here is whether we're going to be able to go to Castletown after we get the Shadow Crystal. Because we're obviously not going to have access to the Shadow Crystal before we go into the Dark World in chapter 5. And we're probably going to get a lot of our preparatory work done in Castletown before we go. And now that we've talked about the eggs and the Shadow Crystals, let's move on to what Toby Fox was talking about in his newsletter this month. And that was about the idea of a light-hearted chapter. And this goes into a bit more on, like, what the plot of chapter 5 is going to be, sort of like what we were talking about earlier. It seems weird to think that, like, the story will just take a gigantic step back from the stakes that is already laid out in order to just have another, like, little fun chapter 2-esque adventure smack in the middle between the plot dense chapter 4 and chapter 6. Because it seems like chapter 6 is going to be hella important to, like, the lore and the story and the conflict and everything. However, at the same time, I find it hard to imagine that Toby Fox will just, like, continue directly the trajectory from chapter 4 and, like, the fact that Susie, Chris, and Ralsei all read the final prophecy panel and they know what's going to happen. The issue is, like, I don't think they can really just take back But at the same time, they're going to the festival. The festival's supposed to be fun. So what I think, like, this whole lighthearted chapter stuff is going to revolve around will be, like, Ralsei desperately wants Susie and Chris to have a good time, or but events that have already happened will be tough to ignore. Sort of like trying to put toothpaste back in the tube. I don't think this toothpaste is going to go fully back in the tube, but at the same time, most of the story will surround events that won't be as impactful to the main conflict as Chapter 4. Because Chapter 4 told us the prophecy. Chapter 4 told us, like, what was going to happen and gave us a lot of insight into what future chapters have in store for us. But at the same time, like, I've already talked about, like, the main plot of Chapter 5 is, like, Susie trying to overturn fate. I think it'll be, like, a more lighthearted exploration into how Susie is going to learn about what she needs to overcome fate. And Chapter 6 and 7 is going to be her putting what she learned in Chapter 5 into action. Because as Susie is right now, Susie already has a lot of power over the narrative. She is able to circumvent our actions and our will in a way that, like, no other character is able to. Except for Chris, sometimes. But Susie is, like, way more, like, fuck you to the player. But she doesn't know it. She's not aware of the power that she has over the narrative. I think Chapter 5 will be, like, her realizing that she has more power over the narrative than she gives herself credit for. And then Chapter 6 and 7 will be Susie putting what she learns in Chapter 4 and 5 into action. Oh, and that gets into another thing that we still haven't talked about yet. Is Susie the girl in the prophecy? Because this has a lot of implications and can even tie into a lot of what we've talked about so far. Because if Susie ends up not being the girl in the prophecy, I think what would happen with her is that she discovers, like, maybe she isn't, or she conceives of herself as not being as special as she once thought herself to be, but at the same time coming to the conclusion that since she was able to change fate in the way that she already has by not being the girl in the prophecy and doing what she's already done, Susie and Ralsei might, like, be more optimistic to being able to change fate because of Susie's power to change what happens. And I think that this would make, like, quite a bit of narrative sense. I personally am a bit of a fan. Like, Susie did make herself the protagonist. Like, Susie is the protagonist. The events that we understand Deltarune to happen, we understand them through Susie's perspective. We know extremely little about what Chris is getting up to. And it sort of feels like Chris is like a side character in a story where we control Chris. We know more about, like, what Susie understands. Susie is the character that goes through the most dynamic change throughout the entire story. And Chris just sort of feels like they're along for the ride. Chris has changed too, don't get me wrong. But, like, it's sort of like, is Susie taking the lead here, even though it's us who's sort of, like, driving the story forward. We only understand what happens in Deltarune through Susie's perspective, even though we're controlling Chris. And it's because there is that separation between us and Chris that makes Chris such a mysterious character and sort of, like, almost possibly an antagonistic force. This has nothing to do with Chapter 5, but, like, I'm kind of, like, I've kind of convinced myself at this point that Chris is going to be the final boss. Like, even in the normal route, Chris is going to be the final boss. I don't know how it would pan out exactly, but I just have, like, a little hunch. based on what extremely little we know and what little I can extrapolate from what we've seen thus far. And I know that's pattern seeking. I know that chapter 3 and 4 taught us that pattern seeking in Deltarune chapters 1 and 2 will not get you very far. However, I still have a hunch. And I know that would be kind of like copying off in a way, but like, I can see it happening. I can see it. I'm not going to put that down as a prediction for chapter 5 though. We'll save that for some other time. If, like, that even still ends up being true after Chapter 5, which, like, for all we know, it could completely shatter my perceptions of who Chris is. And I hope it does. I hope it does. I hope that most of this stuff ends up being wrong. But for right now, let's talk about Susie being the girl in the prophecy. And I'm a fan of the idea that the girl in the prophecy is not Susie. That it's Noelle. And I'm not just, like, a fan of this theory because, like, oh, the girl in the prophecy, she's holding a sword, not an axe. Oh, I'm a fan of it for narrative reasons because I think, like, the narrative would be interesting. However, this is just me, like, thinking ahead and basically writing my own fan fiction. So I won't be disappointed that if it doesn't end up being true. Because I trust that Toby would be able to, like, yeah, I also like the idea that it could possibly flip-flop, too, between, like, doing normal route and weird route. I do like the idea, though I don't know if that has, like, entirely something to do with it. But, yeah, we can operate off of, like, potentially Noelle being the girl in the weird route. I think that it could also have implications for the normal route if Susie ends up not being the girl in the prophecy. Okay, up next, let's talk about the vessel. And I'm going to scroll up to what I said all the way back in Chapter 3. Shortly before that came out. Where is that vessel? Will the vessel be important going forward? Prediction. I doubt it. The Thrash Machine will be more important than the vessel. And I was going off of that because there is no prompt to recreate the vessel if you start on, like, Chapter 2. The vessel was discarded. You end up being Chris, who looks like a lot like a vessel would anyway. And I think it's sort of just like the whole vessel creation process was just sort of like to lull players into the false sense of security that, like, they're going to be able to, like, make their own player character or whatever. And I think it was just sort of, like, even supposed to be humorous in a way because it's just, like, the fucking fake blood types. The cold shit, and, like, while Gasper's presence is supposed to be creepy, I think, like, I could also see Gasper, like, potentially having a sense of humor, too. If I'm being honest. But I wanted to readdress this before Chapter 5, because I want to say, my opinion on this has not changed at all. I don't think that the vessel is going to be important. I think there might, at most, be, like, some kind of reference somewhere in Chapter 6 or 7 to the vessel that we made, because it does end up getting saved to memory. But then again, like, no? Maybe not? I highly doubt that the vessel is going to be important. I don't think the vessel is going to, like, have any plot significance later down the line. I think it was just there to sort of, like, introduce the player to the concept that their choices don't matter. And that's it. I said that the Thrash Machine was going to be more important than the vessel in Chapters 3 and 4, and I was right. I was right about that. Reasoning. Because this is an awfully big claim that I'm making here, is that the vessel is going to have no importance. Something that, like, the Deltarune community has been placing, like, so much importance on for 8 years now. Though I think I see, like, the vessel talk dying down a bit. That I've been seeing it sort of die down a bit ever since Chapters 3 and 4 came out. But, like, people still seem to, like, put a bit of importance on the vessel, because, like, oh, it's saved to memory and everything, and oh, it was creepy, we're making a goner, ooh! Oh, and that's another thing I wanted to talk about, too, that reminds me. We'll talk about that after we're done with this. Reason. We were talking about the vessel. The goner maker sequence. And the reason, even though it It is never referenced. You don't have to make one if starting from a chapter other than one. So yeah, that's my big thesis there regarding the vessel. However, even though I don't think the vessel is important, there is another theory that I want to talk about that sounds crazy and has like almost no evidence backing it up, but I think is still cool anyway because of how subtle it's been so far. And I want to talk about Jockington Goner theory. And Jockington is not like the only potential goner that I've seen thus far, because there's also that like fucking bird guy who blocks your access to the top stairwell of the library. And these two characters in particular start talking in a lot more broken English in chapter 4 than they did before. They already spoke in pretty broken English before, but like the way that their lines read makes it seem like they're sort of like losing their minds a bit. My theory, or like the prediction that I have here, is that Jockington and the library book bird guy, not Birdly, are going to exhibit mannerisms like we saw them do in chapter 4, where they start breaking down in terms of their their attachment to the world. Maybe eventually being scattered across time and space, aka being a goner. Now, we are extrapolating a lot from a little here, but I think it sounds radical as fuck. I think it sounds awesome. I think it sounds cool. I think it sounds based, even. However, we have basically nothing to go off of here, other than a small amount of dialogue that we've seen. We're probably not going to see payoff for this yet again until the Roaring. So, fuck, man. We're running out of time here to like explore these important points that theorists have been talking about for like 5 years at this point. Okay, and was there something else that we wanted to talk about before we move on to Weird Route stuff? Oh, another thing that I forgot to predict. Up here. Prediction. I predicted this all the way back in chapter 4. Or that in chapter 4, Noelle would join our team again. And I was on a very, very, very technical term correct about this. However, like, she joined our party in the light world. We already know that Noelle is going to be joining our party in the light world again in chapter 5, because Toby literally posted a promotional photo of it. So the real prediction here is, will Noelle join us in the dark world? I think what I predicted is in chapter 4, Noelle would join us in the weird route to the dark world, and in the normal route she wouldn't. But I wasn't too sure about that. And right now, I think I'm willing to gamble on this prediction again. Not with real money, of course. This is Twitch. We're not allowed to gamble here. But, like, we're gambling credibility. We're gambling clout. We're gambling I told you so points here. I think my prediction will once again be Noelle will join us in the dark world. both in normal and weird routes. And I could end up shooting myself in the foot if it turns out she only joins us in the dark world on the weird route, or only on the normal route. It's more than possible that one or the other could happen, but, like, we're making predictions here. We have to have, like, very clear answers. Something that is falsifiable. Something that we can be proven right or wrong about. So now that we've talked about what... Oh, another thing that I can't believe I put off for this long, and I completely spaced on until just this moment. Rudy. Rudy motherfucking Red-Nosed Reindeer Holiday the Third. Alright, guys. What do we think? Is Rudy dead? Is Rudy dead in Chapter 5? He's infected? Because I've been thinking about this for a while. I've been, like, ruminating back and forth on whether I think Rudy is going to die, or Rudy is going to, like, enter some new stage in his illness where he's incapacitated for the rest of the game. Would it make plot or narrative sense for Rudy to die in Chapter 5? My answer... I think Rudy's dead, man. I think Rudy's gonna die. I think Rudy is dead as fuck. If he doesn't die outright, he is going to become incapacitated for the rest of the light world segments. And I'm being very careful with my wording here. Because when I say incapacitated for the rest of the light world segments, I mean that he is no longer going to be able to interact with the players and Noelle in the light world. Because we already know what happened with Gerson. And and Noelle is probably going to become aware of Dark Worlds in Chapter 5. Like, aware of the nature of Dark Worlds and become aware that it is not a dream. And Susie, in her heart of hearts, is going to see Noelle crying in front of her dead, or completely, like, vegetative state, dad. And Susie knows that Dark Worlds can bring Lightners back in some capacity. Because, in my opinion, I think Alvin made the first Dark Sanctuary, Dark Fountain, in Chapter 4. I think that's the only thing that could explain why Gerson came back then and not later, is because Alvin made the fountain. So, Susie, in her heart of hearts, tells Noelle how to make a dark fountain. And Noelle, in her desperation, creates a dark fountain so that she can see her father again, and possibly even try to make him better. What do we think about this? I know that's a lot to take in. I know that I just, like, really rambled on and created a whole lot of fucking fanfiction for us to parse through. But, like, just at a glance, what do we think about this? I think it's pretty good. I think it's pretty good. However, like, it's a lot. It is resting a lot on one very, very critical plot point, and it branches off so far into the rest of the game that I have, like, no idea if we can just reliably accept it for what it is. Because, like, I think it makes narrative sense, but making narrative sense isn't exactly the only criteria that Toby has for writing something into a story, because the Roaring Knight just fucking showed up in Chapter 3 out of nowhere. Or not quite out of nowhere, but, like, people kind of predicted sort of, like, what the events would do to lead up to the Knight being unveiled, but nobody actually accurately predicted that the Knight would show up in Chapter 3. And that was a huge wrench thrown in, like, people's wish casting for what Chapter 3 ended up being anyway. But I think I'm gonna rest on this for now. I think I'm going to put it on this prediction board, whether it's right or wrong. I think it's totally fine. I think it's totally fine to put up here. And it could be right, it could be wrong. We don't know. We'll find out later. Loved ones. Akin to Gerson. As we have seen proof of concept already. I think that's enough for that. I think we have enough here that we can start going into, like, weird route predictions. And hoo boy, we have a lot to go over here. So if you haven't played the weird route already, go do that. Because I think I'm going to talk about the weird route, and then I'm going to put a neat little bow on everything, and then end the stream. We've already been here for over an hour and a half. And we've already gotten plenty to work with. We have so much here. So much more than I thought I would be able to get down on, like, one notepad document for just one chapter. And I can make a pretty good like VOD out of this. Put a little music in the background and put a neat little bow on it. Put it up on YouTube and use it as like a time capsule. It's all fun and games here. And then in a week we can come back, we can look at what we said, and we can like sort of make predictions or like make little statements on whether what we predicted ended up coming to pass. Sort of akin to what I did with my chapter 3 and 4 predictions a couple months ago. Of course, the chapter 3 and 4 stuff, we already, we had chapter 3 and 4 for a year before I made those, like, updates. But chapter 5, I think we can, like, wait a week and then do that. I think that'll be more than enough time for us to collect our thoughts. So, weird route. Weird route. I am like almost as at a loss of what to think the weird route is going to end up being, despite the fact that we got an entire section in chapter 3 describing what the weird route is going to look like. And that is terrifying. Just us getting various answers that Toby was able and willing to give us a clear answer at all to anything that seems to be relating to the weird route, because like the whole Deltarune ARG thing that we've been losing our minds over, it seems to be like very connected to the weird route. Our relationship, like the player's relationship with Noelle, and like what we're going to have her do in the weird route. It's terrifying. It is terrifying, evil stuff. Like, my initial shock reaction when I played chapter 4 is like, Toby, what the fuck? Why did you put that in a video game? You wrote that, you put it in, and it was like nuts what we are like doing in terms of puppeting Noelle. And I'm like, I think it will be very interesting. I'm going to pull a Dr. Ding's Gaster here and say that this is very interesting. I am probably going to hate myself for what's going to happen in the Weird Route in Chapter 5, but let's start making a few predictions. Noelle becomes stronger. How did this happen? How is this going to pan out? How is Noelle going to become stronger? Are we going to follow what we saw in the Chapter 3 sword route? And are we going to kill Lightners in Chapter 5? It is so difficult to say, but we have to make some kind of prediction here. Because, like, the weird route is even less predictable than the normal route. Because we don't get any straightforward promotional material about the weird route. Everything that we have seen about the weird route has been through an ARG and is very cryptic, and the only straightforward stuff that we even have about the weird route in the first place is Noelle getting stronger with ice magic and using Snowgrave. Everything that came after that is us taking control and like creating potentially a new vessel out of Noelle, which is insane. And I think that this is going to be the chapter where we start killing Lightners. Susie and Ralsei get out of the picture. And it's probably going to involve killing them too. It sucks. And I don't know why they would have us be doing this that early, and why Chapter 5 is so much smaller than 2 and 3, but like I don't know what to make of any of this. I don't know if it's going to be Chapter 6 before we start killing Lightners, but it seems like that's something that we're going to be doing. If the sword route is anything to go off of. And I think we're just going to have to take our answer and we're going to roll with it. And the other thing about the weird route, Noelle starts acting even weirder in the light world, and it will be easily attributable to the trance from the thorn ring. Why is the thorn that we got powerful enough to create potentially a new soul in Noelle? And how is this going to manifest itself? Are Chris and Noelle going to become like some kind of hive mind? Is Noelle going to be the character that we take control of for chapters 6 and 7 somehow? And like that does a lot more than just like make implications for the ending of Deltarune. That is like crazy shit. But I think based on what we've seen so far, it's unavoidable that we're gonna have weird route shit going on in chapter 5. I can't pull what I did in chapter 3 and just say, oh, there's not going to be a weird route in chapter 5. There's going to be a weird route in chapter 5. Like, we're going with Noelle to the fucking festival. And based on what I predicted as well, which, like, take it with a grain of salt. Take everything I say here with a gigantic grain of salt. She might very well come with us to the Dark World, even in the normal route. And if she goes with us to the Dark World in the weird route, is there going to be, like, a similar story to what we did in chapter 2? And better yet, is Susie going to catch on? That's another thing too. I think this is the part where like Susie has to begin to notice that something is wrong. Like Susie is not exactly quick on the uptake on a lot of these things, but like she's gonna be at the festival with Noelle and Chris, and she has got to notice that something is wrong, and she's got to like call out Chris or Noelle for it. Susie will begin to we can already start acting weird as Chris, and Susie will take notice of it and express her concern. Actively call out how strange Noelle and Chris are acting, but it will be too little, too late. And do I have to say any more? And finally, last and most certainly not least, the answers to the ARGs that people were getting this morning. The lake. What the fuck is going to happen at that lake? It doesn't seem to be related to Noelle smiling, but it does imply something important will happen there. Just purely based on what I've seen so far, I think what is going to happen at the lake is that the main vessel that we are going to be controlling for the rest of the game will shift from Chris to Noelle. This is wildly out there. This is just me making shit up right now, but I have a hunch that this important event that is going to happen at the lake is us taking full control of Noelle, leaving Chris without a soul. In a sense, both of them being used up, as it were. And that's a lot to take in. That would be a lot to take in. Because, like, why would Noelle thank us for putting her in a trance? Could it be an indication that Noelle is a more willing vessel than Chris? Is it because of her potential, like, mental weakness but physical strength that we are going to be able to take control of Noelle and leave Chris, who is beginning to act less and less in our interests and more in line with their own freedom, while Noelle is a more willing recipient of control over her? Like, is this the implication that is going to happen here? Could this have anything to do with, like, us controlling simultaneously both Chris and the thing on the other side in, like, that one part of the Weird Roots board thing? I don't know. But it's just a thing that I'm going to put here tentatively, and we will find out about it in a day or two. Oh my god, they added swap mode to Deltarune. Is this just me wish casting swap mode into Deltarune? 90% chance it is. But I don't know. I am just making predictions based on what little I know about what we have seen. And it's a terrifying thought. But the Weird Route is supposed to be terrifying. And we're just going to have to take with it what it is. I wish there was a more lighthearted thing that we could end on. But I think we sort of exhausted everything that we wanted to. And, like, Chapter 5, it seems like it's going to be pretty lighthearted. It seems like there's going to be a lot of fun stuff. It seems like there's going to be shit happening with regards to like, important plot beats. But, like, it also won't be as narratively shattering as Chapter 4 was. And I predict that if Chapter 5 actually ends up being like a fun, lighthearted, let's forget about everything for a day adventure, I think it'll be worse than Chapter 3. But if it ends up having like a bit more gravity, if the gravity of importance like doesn't take a total backseat to what's going on, I think Chapter 5 has the potential to even like be better than Chapter 2. I don't think it'll be better than Chapter 4. Like, you have to understand how fucking high Chapter 4 raised the bar. It is very hard to be as good as Chapter 4. That's why I see it being as good as Chapter 2. And Chapter 5, like, it looks great. It looks, like, really good. Way better than anything we've seen before. Like, it's only, like, even really rivaled aesthetically by the Church. Which, like, goes to show that the level of quality took a massive step up between the already massive step up that Chapter 2 was, like, ahead of Chapter 1. I don't think it's going to be possible for Chapter 5 to be as, like... Don't get me wrong, I still like Chapter 1 a lot, but I don't think it's... I don't think, like, based on what's been going on so far, I don't think that Chapter 5 will be worse than Chapter 1. At worst, I could see it being, like, on the level of Chapter 3, quality-wise. And Chapter 3 had some cool shit in it, don't get me wrong, but, like, compared to Chapters 2 and 4, I'm sorry, man, it's no contest. But we're going to have to do with that what we will. I think it's time for us to bid farewell and see ya on the other side. I'm going to stream Chapter 5 tomorrow just so that I can get my reactions to it on video. And since we're already at, like, almost exactly 2 hours here, I think this is probably the perfect time for us to like, put a pin in it. And say that, like, this is our Chapter 5 predictions board, and this is what we're going to be running with until I make my corrections video. I hope all of you have a good night. I hope all of you have a great Deltarune playthrough tomorrow. And I will see you on the other side.